So, hey, what did you learn this week?
What I learned this week, and something I probably already knew, was that you are not to DM Richie Vaughn to start a fight. He won't argue with you. He just won't.
I don't do internet arguments anymore.
You do not.
Yes.
And what did you learn this week?
I learned that your partner should not be your therapist, which I already kind of knew.
Yeah.
But I learned that you had differences of opinion when I put it out there.
Yeah. Some thoughts on it.
All right. Should be cool.
Yeah.
So join us for a conversation on the Hallspace Podcast.
See you soon.
It's about connections. Welcome to the Hallspace Podcast. It's about connections. I'm your host, Dr. Ritch Hall, and this is a weekly conversation about whatever and however I see to connect things. For people who want to connect, chat, and learn a thing or two about a thing or two. Without further ado, let's start the show. Welcome to the Hallspace Podcast. I'm your host, Ritch Hall, here with my lovely and capable wife.
Welcome. Nicole Hall here.
Hey, and how's everybody doing today?
All right. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. It's been a very interesting day for some reasons we'll get into.
Yeah. How's your week gone?
It was a busier week. We're near the end of the semester, so this is always the point where I'm counting down not just the weeks to the end of the semester, but the days.
The days.
Yes. And we're in pretty much the home stretch. It's 2 more weeks of classes.
Okay.
And then exams.
Okay.
So
wow.
the light at the end of the tunnel is definitely here. And so all the students get stressed. I'm the guy who helps them with their stress. It's interesting times.
Oh, yeah. So you're going to get
there's usually a
surge of
there's usually
clients.
A flood at the end where they just need a lot of help and support. And we'll see how the summer goes because this has been we kind of got back up to speed after COVID to where they were now needing our services. Last semester they were a little less engaged in services in part because there were fewer students on campus, but now we're back up to normal,
which our numbers used to be.
Yep.
Wow.
Which means I'm working much harder now.
Yeah.
And new information to those out there. There's the colleges are trying to go back next year, so I'll be back in the office in the fall and possibly be back to seeing people in the fall if it all works out.
Right.
I'm still not 100% sure it's all going to work out. I kind of believe that the future will continue to be uncertain, or at the very least, I've committed myself to the idea that the future could be uncertain.
There's always that caveat that we don't know what the future holds, right?
And to me, the idea that people seem to act as if they know the future will be certain is weird, to say the least.
It's a bold move, God.
Yeah.
It's a very bold move.
Bold strategy.
We
Let's see how
never
it plays
know
out.
what the future held,
Well, the interesting thing is that in contemporary society, we sort of act with certainty as if we already know.
We do, in very bold ways. And maybe, this whole COVID thing is to say, you don't know.
Yeah.
We don't. We have no
Much
idea.
of Western society is built around the idea that we think we know how things are going to work out.
Yep. So you're doing your countdown for your job, and you said 2 weeks for college.
Yeah.
Oh, I am also counting down for the kids in school.
Yeah, right, because that's going to happen.
Hallelujah.
Sooner than later.
Yeah, they also only have a few more weeks. They're out right before Memorial Day, so the Zoom calls and the drop off at the crack of dawn and the pickup in the middle of my work day.
It'll be great when it's all over, right?
Yes. However, they'll all be here all day.
Yeah, that's the trade-off.
So that there's definitely the trade-off. I mean, honestly, the only one that has been going to school this last quarter was Victoria. So we would still have the girls and Ron Daniel, but at least there isn't that additional pressure of homework.
Yeah.
And logging in and making them log in and double checking to make sure they're logged in. And we have my oldest niece, Jaden, coming in to help.
We got a babysitter.
She's so excited, and she's working on age appropriate activities for all 5 of the kids.
Yeah, she seems to be
She's
thrilled.
Super excited
to
about it. I'm excited. She just turned 17. So I'm proud of her. So it'll be her job to keep them out of my hair. So the fact that they'll be here is fine. But hopefully I'll be able to, work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, looking forward to the summer. It'll be unusual.
It will.
You're going to hear my wife coughing throughout the session.
Can we talk about that for a minute?
We should probably address it because it's going to be on the tape.
I apologize for coughing. I do not have COVID.
According to her test today,
I got
she does not have
tested yesterday.
the COVID.
I do not have the COVID.
But she has picked up some kind of crud that's got her feeling
What
bad.
I have is Cincinnati weather. That's what I have. That's what I have. I have Cincinnati saying, "Oh, it's spring. Oh, but it's not spring. We're going to give you a sinus infection. It's going to stay in your chest for 2 weeks." That's what I have. That's what it's called. So last episode that I was on, I said I want spring to actually be spring. And I think God took that as me telling him what to do. So I'm sorry. That was my bad, dog. Because then what happened was we had a full-on ice snap, snow, right? So it's like, 60, 70 degrees. And then 2 days later, our snow, ice on the ground, like 30 degrees. It was horrible. So... Yeah, my body doesn't take to kindly to that, so I apologize for my voice and the cough. I'll try to cough away from the microphone if I can.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, that's just gross otherwise, right? But yeah, so I got the crud, and I wanted to make sure I didn't have the COVID, which I didn't, but you got to be sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah. We're dealing with sickness in the house with Nicole having the cold.
It's just me. Nobody else.
Yeah, nobody else has gotten sick. Victoria's had a bit of a cough for quite some time.
That's true. Well, I still stand by Julie sneezing in my eyeball at some point.
Yeah, that did happen.
I think
so it's
happened.
possible that contributed
She was also sick. She just had a regular cold too, so.
And so, with that, we're trying to do a show today with Nicole not feeling well.
Yeah. We're going to get through it. And
we're going to get through it.
We're going to talk about our first topic.
Yes, we're definitely to our first topic of discussion for the day.
And let me say this. The interesting thing about this is that you posted it on your page, and I heard it immediately like, oh, well, maybe not. And so let me read it. It says, I think the reason people think their partners can be their therapists is because they think therapy is just talking about their feelings. Therapy is a treatment plan. Psychology is a science. Having someone listen to you vent is not the same as creating a plan to heal trauma. Which I agree with. But,
yeah. And you had a reaction to it, though. You had some
I did.
questions.
I'm like, so you can't be my therapist? You can't therapize me? You're not always therapizing me?
I am not always therapizing you at all. Now, I tend to think with an emotionally intelligent lens.
Right,
that allows me to kind of address issues as they come up.
In an emotionally intelligent way with facts and knowledge and research and whatnot. But,
right.
I thought it was just funnier than anything because I think that's one of the things that people expect their significant others to be able to do.
Yeah.
And people expect you to do it as well because you're a psychologist, and it's like, no, but we're friends. No, but you're my,
so most of my friends I don't seem to have a lot of friends who expect it of me. Most of my friends don't expect me to work off the clock.
Not true friends. No.
Yeah. I mean, that isn't to say that there haven't been people who pop up in my life who are like, hey, give me advice on this. And if people ask specific questions and I can boil down into the specificities of their situation, then I give advice. But I try, most people assume psychology is advice, just like they assume it's venting. So it isn't that. I do believe that the right partnership can help a person heal past traumas, but that alone can't. So not everybody has a mental illness. Not everybody has are broken in a mental health way. Right. So not everybody needs a therapist necessarily. Now, I do believe that most people, a large percentage of people go through a mental health crisis of some sort in their life. Okay. If you think about the types of things that can happen with a person, any number of things can happen to you that you might need to talk to someone about.
Right.
You know, and that's just the normal things we expect to happen in life. Right. So, you know, a really bad breakup might lead you to a point where none of your friends and family can support you in the way you need. You know, or, you know, a death in your life where grief gets a hold of you and you can't let it go. Any number of things where, you know, just the people around you might not necessarily be able to support you in dealing with whatever the trauma might be.
They may not be equipped.
They might not be equipped.
I mean, they may not be able to handle it for themselves, let alone for someone that they know. You know? And they shouldn't be expected to, right?
Well,
I mean, there's
people
a level
be expected to emotionally support you, but everyone has their limits with regards to what they can provide.
I think there is, though. I mean, there's this presumption that because we're close, that there is this expectation for you to help me through this, and that isn't necessarily what you should base your relationships on. That's all I'm saying. Right?
Not in an unspoken way.
No, not in an
which a lot of people do.
No. Like, listen, if my friends call and they need something and they want to chat about it, I'm there 100%.
Yeah.
Right. But there's this give and take, though, that happens with a good relationship.
Most relationships do have some sort of balance. As we've talked about before, very few relationships will ever be perfectly balanced. Right. Because just circumstance doesn't allow it. Like, fairness is an ideal that we created in our minds, but, you know, there are very few things in the universe that are fair. They balance out in some ways or another. If you think about, you know, just on the basis of what an ecosystem is, you know, the bees aren't asked to carry the same loads as the birds, but they all have to contribute. You know, in that same way, we can't necessarily. Very often we'll get frustrated with, say, friendships or relationships because the person doesn't give me back what I put into it. You know, if I go to you and tell you, you know, everything that's going on with me and you don't return it, it's like, well, then maybe you don't care. And that's often not the case. It's very often just people will fall into what their strengths are. So one of my strengths is listener. I'm not always a great talker. In a relationship. You know, that doesn't mean that I don't have things to say or that I never speak up for myself or make things known. But more often, I'm going to follow my listening skills in most of my friendships and relationships. And so some of what I'm kind of saying here is recognizing the strengths of the person you're dealing with, having some emotional intelligence around what your needs are, being able to reflect on those needs. Very often we say in like couples therapy or relationships, you should almost never tell a person flat out no to any request. You should always be willing to negotiate because this is a two-way street. There are two of us with two different needs and agendas, and we should be able to figure out how to meet in the middle on most things. You know, there are some things, you know, no. Do we want, you know, if you say stab me in the chest, I'm never doing that. I'm not going to do something that harms you or could harm you or put you in harm's way. Ideally, if I care. But like if we're trying to negotiate over just several aspects of the relationship, one that often comes to mind is, will we go to therapy together? And you have people who are like, I will never go to therapy. And it's like, that's not a thing you should probably draw a line on, because if the person's asking for it, that means there's a significant need in the relationship and you should at least be willing to meet them halfway. Well, I mean, a lot of times that can be the death of the relationship. Very often it's gonna lend itself to the relationship deteriorating because anytime somebody expresses a specific need around their emotional health, their emotional needs that you say flat out no, that need cannot go unfulfilled forever. I mean, there are many other ways in which that plays out in other aspects of the relationship, the sexual relationship, the emotional relationship. Like if a person needs physical affection, you're not providing it in any way, then that person's going to slowly but surely lose the love in the relationship. That they have respect as a thing that relationships need to be healthy. Communication, you know, and these are often the sort of typical requests you get. So in order to keep that relationship healthy in that regard, you want to keep providing those things that feed the other person, but that you can't be responsible completely for their mental and emotional health. You know, one of the things that I thought was interesting about what Will Smith and Jada went through was the recognition of I can't make you happy.
I was just about to bring that up and say
it's right there.
They are not responsible for each other's happiness. I want you to be happy. You want me to be happy, but it is not my job.
I can't take the sole responsibility for that.
No.
And also, I can't put that on you if I'm unhappy completely. Now, there are things you can do that can help to enhance my happiness, provide for it, but you are not the sole arbiter of my happiness. And you couldn't be.
No, that's
because
not.
We're two separate creatures who have to have some understanding of what our particular individual needs are.
But
that we can be interdependent on each other.
Well, in a lot of ways, some levels of happiness are a choice. Mm-hmm. It's about perspective.
Yeah.
And it's about
and expectations and what your actual real needs are versus what you think they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and very often we'll set these sort of lofty ideals and never match up to them.
Right.
And I could definitely say there are many times in my life, if I look back on things where you had an ideal, reality didn't meet it, and now even though the situation isn't bad, you're looking at it as if it's not meeting your needs.
Right.
Which is very, unfortunate, because that's not, that shouldn't have to affect how things are going for you.
Yeah.
You should be able to, and I try to take the sort of Buddhist, middle ground, stay in the present approach.
Live in the moment.
Live in the moment. Mm-hmm. Because I do believe that there is an inherent value in not getting so caught up in what I expect to happen and what I want to happen.
Right.
And not the way I think the past has affected me, but instead in the now, can I enjoy can I work with what I have? Can I play the hand I'm dealt? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I do believe that that's where I'm usually at the most peace, where it's like, this just is what it is. It's not exactly what I expect. It may not be 100% what I want, but it is what it is. And if I get frustrated with it or upset with it or sad that it's not meeting those expectations, I'm just ruining myself more than the situation's ruining me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could say very often through my life, it's like, rich people exist, they're living this kind of high on the hog lifestyle. And you're like, well, why don't I have many of the resources and whatnot?
Why not me?
Why not me? And that's a normal concern, a normal sort of anxiety.
Yeah.
And, not having money is not the same as what having it is. So, having limited resources is definitely an anxiety provoking circumstance.
Yeah. Yep.
But if you get so caught up in it, you're probably missing out on the blessings you have before you.
You're missing out on what you do have.
Right now.
Yep.
And so I try to keep that in mind when thinking about how to sort of maintain a certain level of emotional health and stability.
Right.
And so once again, that's sort of me working on being more self-reflective, more just in the moment.
But there are people who are unable to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And if you can't do that on your own and your friends aren't quite doing it for you, then you might need some help. You might need to go talk to somebody.
Yeah. Well, and I think the interesting thing about that post too is it's like, respect the craft, right?
Very much.
Respect the idea that it is a science and that you went to school for a long time to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And so, me being able to have a conversation with you and your level of emotional intelligence is going to be different than someone else's relationship.
Yeah. And I could definitely say that throughout the process of our relationship, and we've mentioned it in here before, you've developed a significant amount of emotional intelligence.
I have.
That wasn't, I'm not saying you weren't built for it. I do think you had the capacity for it early in the relationship. I think that was one of the reasons that I chose you over other people. You stood out in part because you seem to have this capacity.
Yeah.
I thought of your grandmother definitely as a very emotionally intelligent person.
She was, yeah.
She didn't have all the book learning, but she understood people and she understood herself in a way. Yep. And there were ways in which I remember in talking to her, it's like, everybody has their dark corners where it's like, oh, you don't want to go there.
Yep.
But she still, my conversations with her were some of the wisest conversations with anyone.
Yeah.
I could say that I've had. And I definitely saw that in you as well, which is why I thought, oh no, she's going to be to be utilitarian, she's going to be a viable partner. Which is
lovely and capable.
Lovely and capable partner. Yeah. So I do think that's a value in how you choose the person you're with, and making sure somebody who can, navigate this thing called life, because it's going to get choppy. I do think one of our strengths has definitely been our ability to handle crisis, because a union is often beset by crisis. Yeah. There's always things happening in the relationship outside it. And you have to be able to deal with it. I remember that was one of the things Terry said, my best friend Terry, and Hall and Hud co-star, said, he's like, you two seem like you've been through some things, but so I don't have the warm and fuzzies for you. I feel like you guys are going to be okay.
Yeah, we by the time we had gotten married, we
we had traversed together. A couple of things.
We had, and then there was still more to come after. So,
always more. It never ends. That's life, though.
No, it never.
That's one of the benefits of I watch a lot of those videos of women, arguing with people like Kevin Samuels and things like that about why they don't necessarily need a man or need a relationship, and it's like, but you're traversing this life alone, and that's scary.
Yeah.
Because stuff keeps happening.
Oh, yeah.
And it'd be great at least to just have somebody to talk to about it, somebody to like hang out with about it, you know, to be able to really spend some time with someone who gets what you're going through every day and not feel like you have to do it all alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's, it's important.
It's valuable.
It is very
There's
valuable.
definitely an inherent value. And the idea that in it, you have to be interdependent. You can't be like, oh, I need to maintain my independence.
Yeah.
I was watching a video today where a young woman was saying, well, I want to be independent, but also I wouldn't mind, or I would love to have a relationship, but I don't want to be stuck in a thing that I can't get out of if it goes bad, which is, you know, kind of bad faith going into a relationship.
Well, I was going to say, just choose the right thing.
Yeah.
And then
you're assuming you're going to choose wrong.
Set realistic expectations, and
yeah.
then when it isn't,
if it isn't, if that ever happens,
then you make a decision,
right? Yeah,
or you determine the value of the relationship and you work through it,
right? And that's one thing that often sort of comes out in some of these bad faith arguments. I think, they assume that whatever will happen, whatever could happen in a relationship, will be enough reason to leave.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of a...
And people are very gun shy about getting out of relationships because, you know, there are certain things that they just can't, you know, abide. And that's not to say that you should put up with certain things like you know, repeated infidelity or physical abuse. Like, once again, if someone's being hurt, you don't tolerate that.
Right.
But that you can sort of decide that everything doesn't have to be a deal breaker.
No, but and you have to decide what your deal breakers are.
And very often in the choosing section of a relationship, people are often, you know, disqualifying partners for a variety of reasons that might not have anything to do with their viability as a partner.
Right.
You know, it's like, well, you know, they didn't know how to use a nail clipper or something.
Right,
it's often something petty. You see a lot of petty things, similar to like in Boomerang. Like, she had bad feet, so she wasn't going to be a viable partner.
Threw her away. Yep.
Right. And I think in part because we have so much messaging around, you know, choosing the perfect partner who provides all your needs, that we sort of assume that they will come to us ready built. And you
flawless.
Know, and flawless. But it's like, even if you got the most flawless partner for you, are you flawless? That's often not a question that's asked.
We're not talking about me,
right? And yet we are, because you're trying to slot a peg into the round hole. But are you the perfectly round hole that you think the peg should go in?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just making some assumptions.
I mean, we're not talking about me right now. And I mean, and again, that's some of what happens, right? You're looking for this list of things. Yeah. And you're not addressing
the stuff about you that might not even make you compatible to those things.
That may not contribute well to what you're looking for. Yeah. Yeah. Or even attract what you're looking for.
Right. And very often, you know, we don't stop to sort of reflect on, what am I bringing? What are they bringing? What do I actually need? Yeah. Will this person actually connect? Yeah. With what my needs are? Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, when we met, we were pretty young, so all that kind of stuff is loosey-goosey.
Right. That's one of the reasons it's easier to do that when you're young, because you don't, like, over time, you develop very specific peculiarities that make you difficult to slot into every, you know, relationship.
There's idiosyncrasies.
I wonder sometimes, and this is just me speculating and talking way too big, but like, were we made to be globalist creatures? Because that's kind of bad. Like, because now we're mixing so many different cultural identities and, you know, regional identities, that we're just like mixing up the pot so much that people think they have more choice
than they actually
do. Because a lot of people just, you know, like, I mean, we often have that narrative that, like, don't marry your high school sweetheart, but it's like some people who knew each other before they fully formed
maybe the person
be okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Are you talking about like compatibility? So like
sometimes those compatibilities come from
proximity
and living in similar cultures. Like in reality, like you and I are two people who've known each other since we were very young. Yep. And there could be messaging around, well, no, wait until you're later in life to choose a person who, you know, they've also had their own experiences and maybe their experiences will make you compatible to you. But I mean, you know, did our grandparents have it? Your grandparents knew each other when they were children. My grandparents knew each other when they were, you know, children. It's like, why did we get away from that?
Yeah.
I guess.
I think I will say, I think there are a subset of people who do an immense amount of traveling at a young age, and they're sort of worldly in this way that they adapt to a lot of different cultures. And I think there are a lot of those kind of people who would have the ability to sort of maybe find someone kind of anywhere. Will they settle down? Maybe not. Maybe the traveling is just a part of the experience. But I think that there are probably a subset of people that are like that.
Yeah, I'm more talking to the fact that people often assume, well, I can't get married unless I've done all this traveling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I hear
the idea that we often sort of act as if we have to have lived all of our life before we settle into a relationship.
Well, I mean, and then it speaks to like, oh, well, you've settled now. You can't have fun and have adventures.
Right.
And that's not true.
Right.
That's totally
right.
Not true.
I think there's some confusion in that messaging.
I agree.
That makes people, once again, start to reject things. Well, I need to have a relationship that involves a bunch of traveling. And if I can't have that, I can't have anything. And once again, there's often a lot of all or nothing thinking or fear of the extremes happening.
Yeah.
When in reality, you know, if you make a relatively sensible choice, there's going to be, once again, there's going to be conflict. It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be this big. Yeah, because you're both human creatures. And so that person is putting up with you just as much as you're putting up with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that nothing good can come of it.
Yeah.
You know, and so that doesn't mean that you're limiting yourself. And then a lot of people, I mean, the majority of people who worry about, you know, I'm not going to get to travel. Most people on this planet don't do that anyway.
Well, they think they should or that they want to, but then
they might never end up doing it.
But then they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I also definitely give some credit to the idea that these conversations seem to be being had on the internet by people who have these conversations on the internet. And there are plenty of people who do find love and get married and are fine.
Yeah.
But if you go to the internet where people are talking about it, they're talking about it for a reason. That's often because they may not necessarily have the guidance that I could say that we had from, you know, my own father, your grandmother, and the people in our lives who helped us to better understand what relationships are. I'm definitely now at a place where I kind of have a much clearer understanding of why people might sort of traverse situations, particularly the older I get, where it's like, oh, this isn't ideal, but it works. So why would I mess it up?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you can come up with an idea in your head, but who's to say that even is what it should be?
Yeah.
Because just because you can idealize something doesn't mean it is and should exist. Just because you thought it up. That's often a conversation I'm having with our daughter, who seems to like come up with just these grand, and it's like, you could be imaginative, but you can't be upset because the ideal didn't happen. That's not reality.
It's got big dreams, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to circle back around to the original topic, this idea that, you know, I think a lot of this boils down to, hey, relationships are work, but they're not mental health work, or they shouldn't be. I mean, there's an element of it in there. Like, you have to be my emotional support, and you should be to a degree, but that you can't fix me. That psychology is a science where a lot of knowledge has been attained, and that you should be, if you need it, open to having a conversation with someone who does it for a living.
So you won't therapize me?
I mean, if you go back to some of what I said even earlier in this conversation, I have slowly but surely worked to try to make you
slowly but surely therapize me.
Yeah. I've been in that way that everybody sort of hopes that their partner adapts, you know, because you weren't perfectly suited for me, but we've worked to adapt to become partners that are more suitable for each other. So, you know, as we talked about in a previous show.
So like, we weren't a match made in heaven is what you're saying?
You cussed me out that first time. And I was like, we're never doing that again. And because you were agreeable enough to stop doing that and not think you had to be that person.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, we can keep doing this. But if you had kept cussing me out, then I'm going to go. I don't do that. I've done that in our relationship and never again.
Oh, man.
So in that way, no.
No?
So no. I mean, and like I said, I think people are, you know, however you are with religion, you can believe, oh no, people are perfect for each other. I think no matter what, there's an element of shaving down and connecting.
Yeah.
And I do believe that the people should. I think sometimes people get this very like, no, people should be boldly and authentically themselves. And it's like, you might be yourself to the point where you push people away or where you make yourself incompatible with people. Interdependence takes a certain level of vulnerability to the other person.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, you know, there's always the say, oh, I'm just being me. But, you know, sometimes if you really reflect, some of that is too much.
Yeah.
Right?
You might be too much.
Or not enough, depending on, you know, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah. And it's ideal to think everybody should just deal with you at your best and your worst, but why are you giving someone your worst?
Yeah.
And not, sometimes being you, there's both of us, all of us within us have some level of just being me. That's bad.
Right.
You can have too much of anything.
There are traits.
Right.
Yeah, there are traits.
Where it's like, just to be agreeable
or
and to maintain a relationship, I need to work on these things.
Yeah.
But if I act as if being me means I don't have anything to work on, then I am probably treading into a-hole territory.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what, because I share the planet with other people. Another thing that I say to my daughter all the time.
Then you're really falling into the narcissist hole, right?
That's when you start to get close to that narcissism. I don't have to change anything about me for anyone. And it's like,
there's nothing wrong with me.
But you share the planet with other people, and what you're doing to be you might not be compatible with the planet full of other people.
Well, and some of your behavior may hurt other people.
Right.
I think that was the biggest thing that I saw when I watched that Red Table Talk was like,
which Red Table Talk?
There was a Red Table Talk where they talked about narcissism in general.
Yeah.
And they had 3 different examples of what the types of narcissism look like. And then they had the psychiatrist sort of speak on each of those different situations. And one of the big things was when she sat down with this guy who was a narcissist, and his dad was a narcissist, and he was trying to figure himself out. His world had fallen apart.
Yeah.
What he said was, I did these things. I lost 5 jobs in a row. And what she said to him was, do you realize that your behavior hurt that person that day, that they went home and maybe they cried about it, or they were really upset about it, or they couldn't play with their kids because of the way that you behave? He was like, nah, no. Yeah. He's like, nah, they might have been upset about it later. And she was like, no, I guarantee you they were upset about it later. And so it's the idea
with them.
Yeah, exactly. There's this idea that there's a part of you there are parts of you that could possibly hurt other people.
Could affect other people in negative ways.
Other people in negative ways.
And you should be thoughtful of that.
And you should be thoughtful.
You don't necessarily have to let it govern you, but you should be thoughtful about what you say and do.
You should be cognizant at the very least, right?
And what that puts into the world.
Yep.
So the ability to self-reflect is what separates narcissists from non-narcissists from narcissists. Narcissists struggle with self-reflection, from seeing themselves through the perspective of others. They feel justified in behaving because they don't think there's anything wrong. They haven't done anything wrong. Why would you even assume that they had? Right. And so that makes it difficult, right? And for them to change because they see no reason to change. They are who they are. Right. And I think when I was thinking of the post, it was like, there are people that are narcissists in that way, that they expect that their spouse or their friends or whoever should listen to their problems and should meet their needs, and whatever that need is, whether they're a psychologist or not, whether they're a chef or not, whatever. Like, you're supposed to meet my needs, period. Right? Whatever that is. And that does speak to, once again, what our assumptions are around love. A lot of what contemporary love is this person is supposed to meet all my needs. And in reality, there are many needs that this person might not be able to meet, that they shouldn't have to meet necessarily, that you can get those needs met by other people. We talked about that before. Like, I'm never going to be able to talk to you about IT things. You should have other friends who you talk about IT things with, right? Like, there are aspects of your personality. Like, I would expect you to be the person I go to talk about Lego or video games, right? I have other people for that. No, thank you. And it's okay that you don't, because I have to have other spaces outside of you, because I am still an independent creature who, has interests that might not align with this relationship. Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's why you have friends. Right. That's why you have other friends you can talk to about stuff. Other friends. Other connections, because you do still need those. I can't, use those friendships at the expense of my relationship. Nor can I. No, but they're separate. Little compartments. And good for you. They help you remain feeling enriched and connected in the larger world. So I definitely feel that. So don't go making your romantic partner be your full therapist, or even your friends and family. Go to a professional who knows what they're doing. Yeah, especially if you're really dealing with a ton of stuff. Especially if you're dealing with a ton of stuff. Yeah. Like, and honestly, I can't tell you how many times I have my college students who are at home, they assume that their friends they made in college are going to like carry the burden of their anxiety or depression. And it's like, that's asking a lot of this 19-year-old who's just trying to also live their life. It's unfair. A lot of like scary roommate situations where a person has like full emotional and psychological breakdowns, and they're like, I'm just going back to my dorm room where my roommate will just deal with me and they'll watch me. And it's like, I don't know if we can ask that of them, because they might just be trying to live their life too. Once again, that gets into that territory of them not being thoughtful about how they come off to other people. It's like they don't want to have to like remove all the knives from the apartment because you're a danger to yourself.
That you're gonna.
They just want to pay rent and go to school. Like that's what they're responsible for. But I mean, very often we will assume that and often these people are help rejecting. Like they need considerably more help. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to. Even like we're at a phase in my job where people near the end of the semester are often like, I thought I'd come in because I've been depressed all semester, but I also don't believe in what you do, and I don't want to talk to you. It's very weird.
Why are you?
Yeah, it's like, oh, so you're in the office. Do you think I'm going to convince you? Because I got people out there who want to do this,
right.
Who are clamoring to get in to have a conversation with me.
You're taking up that hour, honey.
So, and I'm the type of therapist that will spend some time with you if you need it. So very many of my therapists will sort of, it's like, oh no, I don't want to do this. They don't like the people who reject help and yet show up in your office. I'm the guy who's like, I'll give you some time. I can't give you all my time. And when this isn't working, we'll both agree this isn't working and go our separate ways.
Yeah.
But very often I get the ones who are like, nope, I'm here because somebody told me I should be. And yet I don't believe in what you do or how it works.
So does that mean you're not going to do the work? Because this isn't going to work if you're not.
It's not going to. It does not work if you do not agree to do the work.
Yeah.
It is necessary that you buy into the process. Now, I'll work on convincing you, but I can't pull you in from a negative. So if you do go seeking that therapeutic help or support, please be open-minded to it, right?
Open-minded is a good word for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to go to commercial real quick. We got a couple subjects on the other side we want to talk about, but so glad you can join us. Thank you.
We appreciate it and see you soon.
Mm-hmm. So let me tell you about Anchor Podcast. It's the podcasting service that I use. Anchor.fm is the easiest way to make a podcast, and there are many different reasons why, but foremost is it's free. So you don't need to go out and buy a whole bunch of equipment. If you have a phone or a computer and a microphone, you can record and edit your podcast right on your phone or computer. So that's one major benefit, as well as the fact that they'll distribute your podcast to several different podcasting sites for you. Not only can your podcast be found on Anchor, it can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast as well. So you don't have to worry about going to all those different sites and setting yourself up. They'll do it for you. You can also make some money on your podcast. Say you have a podcast that only 5 people listen to on a regular basis. They don't limit you on how many subscribers you have to have in order to be able to make a little bit of change for your podcast to keep yourself going. So pretty much everything you need to start a podcast can be found at Anchor.fm. So go download the app either in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or go to Anchor.fm to get started. And I guarantee you, it'll make things so much easier for you, like it has for me.
Love, relationships, the church, the world as we see it today, and many more thought-provoking conversations. This season of Speak Kaya, She's Come Undone Talk Sessions, coming to your ears soon. Keep watching.
Welcome back to the Hallspace Podcast. I'm your host, Ritch Hall.
Welcome, welcome. Hey there.
With Nicole.
Nicole Hall.
It's a Richie and Nikki episode, different than the Hall and Huds.
Yes.
So way less nerd talk over here.
Definitely.
We're often talking issues and our thoughts about things that happen in the world.
Yeah.
And speaking of emotional intelligence, I wanted to tell people kind of what happened to me today. I had a weird interaction.
With a stranger on the internet.
With a stranger on the internet. So guy wasn't actually a stranger in the end, but strange to me. So I'm minding my business. I posted something on Facebook, and it was a white guy talking about racism. And he was basically trying to say that, essentially he talks about how white people don't necessarily experience racism. They experience prejudice, and racism, the growing definition of racism, which is that racism is tied to systems and ideologies and not just whether or not you treat a person different based on their preference. And out of nowhere, this guy texts me DMs me, and he's saying that's not how the suffix works. Just Google it. And I stopped because I've never had an interaction with this person before.
Yeah. So who are you again?
And so I'm like, hey, have we ever had a conversation before? At first I was like, hey, are you trying to educate me on the definition of the suffix, or are you trying to address the making of video? Because I didn't make the video. And then he starts like going into this thing about how, critical race theory's definition of racism isn't right. And I stop and go, have I ever spoken to you before? Because he's giving me definitions of things. And this is our first interaction on a one-on-one level. And I'm confused.
Right.
And then he's like, let me get this straight. Your concern isn't the truthfulness of the claims made here, but rather the nature of our relationship. And I'm like, yeah, I'm genuinely trying to understand your motive.
Why are you talking to me?
Why are you talking to me? Why did you jump into my internet? Right? Because there's tons of things on the internet. And I'm not a person who ever goes around, who very rarely goes around picking fights, because I'm not good at arguments.
Yeah.
I am an educator, and I've said this before. I'm an educator, so I present information. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I'm way willing to have a conversation with someone, but I'm not trying to have what's the point of having a fight?
Though. Yeah.
Right? What's the actual point?
Right. What are you trying to get from this?
He basically starts saying that, the topic is something that he's spent some time researching. So he's very invested. And then he tells me he knows me from this forum called Black Superhero, where we used to talk about comic stuff. Right. So this very nerdy forum that I was a part of several years ago that was black creators and fans.
Right.
And so because he brings up that association, I'm now willing to give him the floor. What are we talking about?
What exactly did you...
And then I basically tell him that when I'm talking about tricky subjects, and this is, in some ways, I'm now giving you a breakdown of how Ritch approaches arguments on the internet and how maybe, you might be helped by thinking in terms of this, how you will approach, not necessarily arguments on the internet, but how do you approach conflict? Because I'm going to tell you my fundamental approach to a conflict. What does the person need? What do they want? And why are they choosing this moment, this thing? And so I basically tell him that whenever I talk about touchy subjects on the internet, I always stop and go, what's my relationship to the person? Because I need to understand the common ground between us.
Right.
If we have no common ground, then I assume that I have no authority. Right. If we have no connection at all, then I have no authority to espouse my ideas, nor do I have any need or leverage to listen to theirs.
Right.
Because we don't know each other.
Right.
If we do know each other, then it's possible. Right.
Right.
That maybe if I assume you have a curiosity about what I think and know,
then that's different. But
you might be coming into this. A lot of times people on the internet come into it with a bad faith. They want to push on you their ideas. They want you to validate their ideas. They're picking a fight. And so I flat out asked him, like, are you doing this for sport? Like, what's your thing? And he's like, I'm not just doing this for a thrill. But he had trouble articulating why he was doing it. And he's like, I don't even know how to answer your question. I feel like I've answered it. And I was like, no, you didn't. Because I kept asking, what do you want here? Do you want me to take the video down? Do you want to tell me your ideas? Because what I kept noticing was he kept legislating for why he didn't believe in critical race theory. And I kind of opened with, hey, I'm not saying that I fully agree with critical race theory, but I do like that there are people still studying the issues around race and having conversations around them. And very often when I'm approached with criticism of critical race theory, it's by people who don't want to have any conversation about race. They don't want the conversations to evolve. They actually want to shut those conversations down. So I'm often putting things on my page, not because I'm trying to start arguments, maybe open discussions, but more often than not, I'm trying to get people to just have conversations.
Right.
And continue conversations and maybe give ammo to people like myself who are just looking for interesting things that talk about race.
Right. Right.
And then he talks about how, it's harder for people to have a conversation about anything because he says constantly redefining words. But I do believe that these definitions are evolving.
Right.
And that, the people who criticize often don't want the definitions to evolve. They want to keep their rigid definition as if somehow out there is a singular tome that tells us the definitions of all the words. And we could say, yes, Webster's dictionary, but I believe in language is fluid. And that it is ever evolving because I know I'm involved in research wherein we understand that the nature of things changes as we learn more about people. Psychology is a social science. And so he tries to tell me the classical definition of racism. And I keep trying to connect with him as a person because that's what I do in conversation. I don't have ideological debates. I'm not a philosopher. So I'm not over here just talking points. And then I realized midway through this conversation, he actually doesn't know what I believe. So he asked me if I'm Christian, and he says, is it safe to assume you're not a Christian? And I said, the last question is why I ask if you know me. Because if you knew anything about me, you would know the answer to that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because my father is a whole pastor.
Right.
So for him to say it's safe to assume I'm not Christian means you have no idea who I am.
You have no idea.
And here's the thing about me. I am Christian, but questioning. So I fundamentally have a core belief that, there is a God, he made the heavens and the earth somehow, maybe intelligent design. I don't have a strong thing on that. I'm not going to argue with anybody about it, but I have questions. The universe is much older than the Bible would tell you, whatever. I don't feel the need to argue with anyone about it. I know what my belief system is around that. And most people might not know because sometimes I'll say things that are just shy of blasphemous or straight up blasphemous.
He actually said you were not.
He said, is it safe to assume I'm not
a Christian?
Because he's still trying to legislate his point. And I'm trying to connect with him as an individual.
Right. And
I said, you seem to be legislating a particular point. And I'm not sure what your intent is. And he's like, my intent is to share an alternate viewpoint. So this is me on a Saturday afternoon. I've shared a video that I thought was interesting while I was on the crapper. And he decided he needed to share his alternate viewpoint with me, but he's not really sure. Like, he's not necessarily able to articulate why does he need to get into. At this point, it's a very lengthy text conversation.
It's a message to you.
Right.
It wasn't like he took your post and said, here's what I think.
He came straight at me and was like telling me to Google things.
Right? Yeah.
And I even opened with, hey, I have a PhD and I study racism. So what are we talking about here? Because are you trying to give me the definition of racism according to what you believe? And he keeps trying to, and he's like, you aren't answering my questions. And I'm sharing an alternative viewpoint. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, what makes you think I should have to answer your questions? You popped into my DMs, guy. You can't force me into an argument. And so I'm full on.
This is the first time we're actually chatting.
This is the first time we've ever had a conversation. And so at this point, I'm in full on Bruce Lee judo mode because I refuse to have an argument with him because I don't understand why we would. I don't know you, sir. I'm sorry to that man. I do not know this man.
I do not know this man.
So why would we fight?
Why?
Right? What do you get out of that?
Why?
And I talk about how it's a danger in these conversations often to have these sort of ideological debates that don't mean anything. When if I know you and you know me, then we could talk about. I have one friend, a high school friend, or actually grade school friend named Clay, who lives in West Virginia. He often, whenever there's something going on in the news, he comes to me, he asks me a question, and we have just a conversation back and forth about, our different perspectives, him as a white guy, me as a black guy. And I'm open to those because I know at least he has a curiosity to the conversation. And we don't agree on very fundamental things.
Right.
Sometimes about my personhood that I try to help him understand.
Right.
Because he's coming from this, well, from my point of view, black people are making a mess for themselves. And I'm like, no, there are factors that contribute. And so I'm more than willing to have those dialogues.
Right.
But if you're coming at me like, I think you're wrong and here are the definitions that prove it, it's like, well, I'm not. And I basically say to him, I don't argue because I don't assume people change their mind.
Right.
I have dialogues. I have conversations. If you have a curiosity about my point of view, but if you're coming at it with you have your own point of view, you don't need to talk to me. You can just have your point of view and I'll have mine and we can walk away from this now. Because why would we continue doing this back and forth?
Why
would we do this?
Why?
Because I'm a 43-year-old man with kids and a wife and like a whole job and I got a pork loin in the smoker. Like I got other things to do today, bruh. I ain't got time to be going back and forth with you on the internet.
You want to have an interesting conversation or you want to fight?
And he's like, I believe argumentation is one of the best ways to find truth. And I don't mean bickering or quarreling, but if you prefer a conversation style, that's fine. And I'm like, I don't agree with you, one. I don't believe argumentation is how you find truth. I believe it can be through a dialogue or conversation. And then he's trying to like catch, he's debating me. And I don't know why he's debating me because I've not offered up a debate. And he's like, well, why would you put up a video without context if you didn't believe it? Because I stopped and said, do you actually know what I believe? Because you seem to be legislating a point that I haven't even said I proved. Like, what do you actually think my belief system is? Because if you know anything about me, one, I'm delightfully weird. And two, I take stances on certain things. The earth is round. I'm not going to fight about it. That's a trigger for me, apparently.
It will. You get upset
and racism exists.
Yeah.
And there are some other things that I will fight about, but like ultimately those are the hills I stand on and will defend. But he seems to be arguing, this different viewpoint that he seems to assume I should have to engage with, and I don't. And so it comes down to first of all, who are you?
Who are you again?
And so he finally kind of tells me who he is. He's a guy from the forum, and he used to be one of those dudes who was getting in fights on the forum all the time. And I'm like, bro, I don't do that. I was like, if you remember me from the forums, I never got into the fray of those quarrels. I love the spectacle on the Black Superhero. Remember we used to go to that thing every year? We used to go to a conference every year. Yeah. The con. It was a con every year.
Yep.
Where we'd all get together and meet up with all these creators of Black comics. And we made some friends along the way and we had a good time. And what we didn't do was fight, because I don't fight with people, particularly if I think we might agree on more things than not.
Right.
And so what was interesting to me was he was fighting with me. He doesn't know that we might actually agree.
Right.
But because he came in ready to have a fight, an ideological fight with me, like, what am I supposed to do with this? Because it's not what I do. Or particularly not now. Like, there was a time in my life where, and I even said this to him, like, I'm 43. There was a time in my life where I'd be pulling up references and wanting to have this full fight with you. But I'm not that guy anymore. Like, I'm more zen now in that regard, because I've been on the internet for too long, and it's just not worth it to dive into every fight on the internet. I'd be at this all the time, and it doesn't even matter. It's unpaid labor. Nobody's paying. Like, I genuinely get paid to teach people things. So if you're not paying me to teach you a thing, we can have a curious conversation, but I'm not digging in.
Yeah.
I had to develop that thick skin to be on the internet. And so at some point I said, my fundamental question is why? What's going on with you, man? How can I help? Like, what do you need? And he's like, that's condescending. I was like, I'm not even trying to condescend you. Why did you show up on a Sunday in my DMs to have a fight with me about your ideology?
Right.
Like, who are you? I didn't come to you. You came to me.
Right.
And he's like, I gave you the answer to my motivation, and instead of delving into the truthfulness, you questioned psychology. And I flat up told him I have a PhD in psychology. So, yeah. So don't assume. And I said, I don't go around picking fights with people on the street because I don't know what they're bringing to it, right? Fundamentally, we don't just walk up to strangers and quarrel with them. We do it on the internet because we assume some level of safety and distance. Right? We assume they can't come at us. But I don't do that because I don't know. You might punch me in the face if I walk up to you and disagree with you on fundamental core values you have.
Right.
And that's just not me. Whenever I hit a conflict, I stop and go, what does this person want? What do they need? Can I give it to them or not? Or should I just walk away? That's genuinely, and that's one of the things that gets me through things at work when clients are coming at me with something and I'm like, this isn't about me. They don't know me for real. If you know me for real and you're coming at me with something that's me, like if my wife comes to me and says, Richie, I don't like this thing, I stop and go, what does she need? Oh, she needs me to change my behavior. And I love her, right? That relationship supersedes my ego. So if it's something I can change, that doesn't mean I never get defensive. It just means I tend not to get defensive because it's like, no, I love her. I love this relationship. So I got to make it work. Right. I got to fold that little bit of ego that might want to just stand on its own 2 feet and fight, but it might not even be worth it. Like, ultimately, like, what's going to make this situation better? Right. If I think I'm completely right, there are times where I've been like, no, I was right. Yeah. You might have to live with it. I'm sorry that it hurt your feelings. I often will never say you have to live with it. Like, that's just not a thing you say in the conversation. That's going to get, Nicole will dig her heels in if I say something like that.
Absolutely. Do you want to fight?
No, actually, I don't. That's the whole point of this conversation. That's the whole point of this conversation. Right? And I'm like, I'm married with 3 kids, man. I ain't got time to fight on the internet. You caught me on the right day to have a conversation, though. And then he finally opens up and tells me who he is. And he's married with 4 kids. He just had a daughter. I'm sorry. He just had his 2nd son 2 weeks ago. I'm like, dude, you're in the hurricane that is multiple feedings and waking up and only sleeping 2 hours of your life.
Don't be like sleepily DMing me to argue.
I'm like,
what that was.
Hey, man, congratulations on the new baby. Yeah. What are we doing this for when we can actually connect as people? Because I prefer that. I don't prefer to just randomly have an ideological debate with someone on the internet. Sir. Who are you? What's going on with you? How you been? That's how I treat my DMs.
How old is his baby? Do you know?
His baby, he's 39. His baby is 2 weeks old.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you here.
You're going to stop me here?
And I'm going to give this man that I do not know some advice. Get off the internet. Yeah. And go get that baby off that mother. Okay.
Well, I mean, what was interesting is he did keep disappearing. So this conversation went on all day. We were talking from he sent me the original DM at 1 in the afternoon, we were talking until like 5 something. And then at that point, I'm now like, hey, congratulations. How many kids do you? You said you have 4 kids, and how old are they? And man, he's got a 19-month-old and a 2-week-old. I'm like, dude, you got way too many little people running around the house, man. Hats off to you.
You got 2 in diapers. Listen.
And so I could have just we could have devolved into like a Peter measuring contest, and I could have just kept fighting, but I just don't do that. Instead, it was like, who are you? What's up? How you doing? Because that's how I treat my DMs. If one of my dude friends emails me about something, I'm more like checking in with them. What's been going on? How are you? It's very rare that anybody hits me with a DM and they're arguing. So just to tell you, that's what's going to happen. If you come to my DMs to argue about anything I've posted, I'm going to check in with how you are first. We're going to talk about, what's the offline stuff. And then mentally, I'm going to use that to calibrate whether or not I should destroy you in an argument.
Speaking of emotional intelligence.
Right.
See, that's what makes you great. I tell you what, if I had a baby 2 weeks ago at 39 and you want to get into my DMs, you want to fight, guess what we going to do?
You love a good fight.
We gonna fight.
You would love a good fight. I don't. Because why am I getting into that space? Why?
I'm up anyway.
I have a mental thing that stops and goes, wait, I'm in a conflict.
I know you
Why? Because I don't like conflict.
And I don't like conflict either.
Let's break this down into components.
Honestly, at 39 with a 2-week-old, I'm not on my phone. Let's just, I'm just
in between feedings.
I'm just putting the baby on and putting her off, putting the baby on and putting her off, putting the baby on. And by on, I mean nipple.
Because I do believe that, one of the reasons that we're able to have these arguments over the internet and everybody feels so divided is because we're so separate as people. And it makes it so difficult to see the commonality. It's so easy to us versus them people, to in-group, out-group people.
It is.
When you don't know who they are. But when you know, hey, this is a father with a 2-week-old baby, why am I yelling at him?
I think that's what is valuable about the whole conversation was that you were able to dig down and say, you're a 39-year-old man with 4 children. I am a 43-year-old man with 3 children. I get where you are because I've been there.
Right.
I'm there right now.
And we got more in common than we have separate.
Have more in common than we do separately. And that is what can really enact true change if people are willing to
have those conversations.
Yeah. No, that's
I'm not just having a random argument because at some point, like I said, he was asking me can you answer my questions? Why would I? What you don't have any leverage to make me answer your questions. And why are we talking about this?
What you didn't know?
Because I usually go curiosity. What made you, what brought you to this point?
What you didn't know was that you were his outlet for adult
interaction. And I would gladly be that if I knew if that's what I knew he needed. Gladly. Any of my friends, if you just need an adult conversation with a person because your kids are just yapping in the background.
My baby is 2 weeks old and I want to fight.
Hit me up.
Okay.
I will gladly have a text conversation with you.
Listen, did he
set the rules?
Did he even sound coherent?
He was very intelligent.
No, I mean that's not intelligent and coherent.
No, he sounded in his bag, and that was why I was like, "What's happening? Why is because I was saying things that I thought was like, hey, who are you? What's going on?" And he's like legislating a point, and it's like, oh no, you're coming at me. You're not even hearing what I'm saying to you because you don't seem to hear that I'm making these appeals to you as a human because you're debating, and I don't do that. I was never on the debate team, bro.
He's getting maybe at 2 weeks the baby's fake sleeping through the night. That's right. What that is.
He's still in the 2-hour cycle. He's barely that was usually
it's about to get bad for him.
Right.
What's going to happen?
Well, I mean, it gets better because then they start sleeping a little longer. Not the 4. They go up to the 4 hours.
No, you bring them home and they fake you out like, oh, this baby sleeps, and then by that 3rd, 4th week, you know how that goes. But
then they're in the 2-hour cycle. Then they're in the 4-hour cycle.
Listen, I look back at my Facebook post when I was just back home from any one of these babies, and I don't sound very coherent. And I know Laura and Bridget and all of them are laughing at me, and it's like the coffee's broken. Coffee's broken. And this dude is having this full-fledged conversation / argument in your DMs, man. No, he was in.
And I thought it was just so interesting.
And he was tired. Yeah. And he's still got to get up and take care of the other 3 kids.
Right.
Which we know is bananas.
Right. I did that.
Humans.
All these humans.
Humans.
That's the reason I said stop making humans.
Oh my God.
No new humans.
No new humans. Who did you say stop making humans to?
To you.
To me?
No, remember you said we're stop making humans.
Oh, we're not going to make any more humans.
We're not making any more humans. We're done with the humans.
Absolutely.
We've made enough humans together.
We've made enough humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're not bringing another thing into this house.
Oh, Actually, some of the things might have to go, is what I heard.
Well, listen.
If they don't act right,
yeah,
that's for everybody. Everybody can go.
Everything can go.
That's a little foreign exchange for you. Everything must go. Yeah. I used to be so sad and ungrateful, but they say nobody knows not the day nor the hour.
I do. I'm like the girl who cried wolf. So I threatened to throw the cats out and the dog and ship the kids to China.
That saved my lonely soul.
Y'all can go.
Because everything must go.
Or you know what? Let me go, and I'll be back.
I'll give you some time off.
Okay. On a beach?
You must come back, though.
I gotta come back.
It's always the stipulation.
It's always okay. I mean,
and so speaking of things that happened that I don't like to argue about, but I do have opinions about.
Yeah.
The death of Ma'kia Bryant.
And that was quite controversial.
Tragic to me.
It was absolutely tragic.
It continues to be tragic to me, in part because of my history. Because there's not a lot of information out about her, unfortunately.
There isn't.
There are very few facts about the case.
About what happened, how it even got to that point. Exactly.
But my heart goes out to her, if for no other reason than, some of you might not know my history. For like 7 years, I worked for a place called St. Joseph's Orphanage in Cincinnati, where I worked with children who had been in the foster system, who were abandoned by their families, who were unable to live with their families, and worked in an after-school program where I always said, you know, every classroom has 1 or 2 bad kids. Imagine taking those 1 or 2 bad kids from every classroom, and you have 14 of them in the room with you, and you're trying to teach them anger management skills and coping skills.
And what were their age ranges?
From ages 6 to 17, 18.
So
they
whole
often
gamut.
would transition out at 18. And you'd have like a little 6-year-old kid in there with a 15-year-old.
17-year-old, yeah.
And you have to like teach all of them coping skills. So you're like having to navigate. And that's one of the reasons that I am as agile a group leader and as agile a clinician as I am, because you learned how to deal with all these different levels of development in the room and try to like do a group with them and let's things like that.
And let's step back, right? So you were in this job before you got you were done with your degree.
Before I was a psychologist. So I started this job right out of college. Right. And then as I went into college,
you really just needed a bachelor's for this, right?
Yeah, you just needed a bachelor's to work there.
Okay.
In a typical field like social work or psychology or whatever,
health related.
You were direct care staff, so you were, you did literally everything. Feeding them lunch, doing the groups. Right. You know, if they need help in the bathroom, you're doing that. Like also like everything. Right. So this is me at like early to mid 20s doing that. Right. And then I kind of secretly still worked for them while I was in the first couple of years of graduate school, and then I came back again while I was an intern to work as a psychology intern there for a year and a half. That ended up being a bad situation in a variety of ways that one day I'll tell the story on that on air. But yes, so I had a long relationship with that place. And one day, because I worked there for more than 5 years, I'll get a small pension from them because they're part of the Archdiocese, and the Archdiocese has a decent pension system. So I'm vested. But anyway, I worked with kids like, from what she sounds like, from what I understand about Ma'kia Bryant, she sounds like a kid I would have worked with. Yeah. A kid I would have warned at some point, like, hey, you need to get your anger under control, because if you don't, you're going to end up in a situation. I remember telling a young lady, like, look, the cops don't always have sympathy for people who look like us. Right. I would often try to give them that messaging because I knew, from my own experiences in the world,
them as a threat
that you are seen as a threat. You are seen as big and bad. I remember one situation where a girl had pulled the fire alarm and she upset the cop, and there was a part of us that was like, ooh, stop talking to the cop that way. Yeah. And the cop arrested her. Yeah. And it was like, ooh, like I did not want to, like I felt torn that she was put into the system in that way. Yeah. I mean, she was, released, and because of the circumstance, she was allowed to go, but... Right, but she got into the system, and once that happens, you're kind of on the radar. You're no longer in the control of the people around you that should care. Yep. So immediately, even though we don't know very much about Ma'kia, I know she has parents. For some reason, she was not in the care of her parents. No, her parents were even her dad was on the scene of the situation. She called her dad first, apparently. And we should actually define sort of there once again, there are some of the details are in controversy, and some of my biggest fear about this case in particular is because of the controversy, no one will spend enough time sort of digging out what actually happened because of what people can say happened. So whatever happened, there was an altercation at her foster home, right? With her and 2 women, at least 2 women.
Right.
The police arrived, and within seconds.
Let's stop there. Before that, she had called her dad, and she had called. Okay,
so that's police. Once again, I'm in giving these particular facts. I'm just going to say the facts that have been corroborated by the police.
Okay, I got you.
And or the newspapers.
Okay, I got you.
Knowing that they do not always have the full picture, but I'm just going to say what we know from right now from the police and the newspaper.
The news articles. Okay, fair enough.
She's in foster care. She is at her foster home. She is. Someone calls 911 to say there is an altercation happening and that someone has a knife. The police arrive at the foster home where she is staying. They see two people or several people in a fight.
Right. They see
someone who has been now identified as her father. They see Ma'kia knock over someone who's holding a dog, and they see a woman in a pink jumpsuit.
Yeah.
They see Ma'kia attack her with a knife.
A knife in her hand. Right.
The cop has his gun out when he gets out the car, and he shoots her 4 times.
Right.
With the knife in hand.
So let me say this. Have you seen the video?
She dies. I have watched the video.
I have not seen the video.
Don't watch the video.
I wish I hadn't Googled the news articles because I haven't seen the video, but now I've seen the clips.
Yeah, the pieces.
And you see this baby laying on the ground.
Yeah.
With these
and he
Crocs,
does try to do CPR for her on her, but she perishes.
He shot her 4 times.
And she's 16 years old.
And she's laying on the ground.
And it's tragic.
It's absolutely tragic. She's got these cute little rainbow Crocs on.
Mm-hmm. And it's a young black girl who was in the system that we did not support enough as a community.
The knife is on the ground next to her.
And that obviously needed more love, more help. And she was not provided it in some way or another.
Yeah. So the system failed her.
The system failed her.
And the officer, whose job it is to de-escalate the situation,
failed to do so.
Took to shooting her 4 times.
Yeah.
As opposed to any other number of options.
Yes.
Now let me
one of the things that I'm the most frustrated about is that everyone assumes that there was nothing else he could have done.
Well, and
I will defy that to my grave because I have disarmed people before with knives, with chairs, with a baseball bat. Like I've in my capacity at the St. Joseph's Orphanage. And I'm telling you that there are social workers and case managers and nurses and doctors and people all around this country,
caregivers,
aides, right now who have had to be responsible for that because we do not put enough into mental health care. We do not put enough into these services to provide them with the security and the support they need. And so I've done it myself.
So you're not speaking out of turn here.
I have, there was a time in my life, and I still have scars on my arms where kids would scratch me, bite me, all sorts of things. So I have had to disarm kids, large children, small children. I've done prone restraints, at least 24 of those in my lifetime. At some point I had to count. And then something happened. There was a bad summer, and I ended up doing way more than I could count. Was usually the guy who was really good at avoiding them because I would, in that moment, what does this person need?
Right.
Can I provide it to them, or do I need to get them out of here because they're too deep in their emotions to be able to resolve this situation amicably?
Right.
Also, my physical size and presence lent me a certain level of authority with certain kids. Like I would drop my keys and they would just know, oh no, Mr. Ritch is mad. Maybe we should calm down. Like I just learned. And I dropped the keys because I didn't want to be in a restraint with my keys on my leg because I had them strapped to me. Right. So that's why I'm so frustrated with this situation because I know everybody thinks there's nothing else that could have been done. And I know there could have been because I've been in situations like that.
Right.
Where someone could have been grievously harmed.
Right.
And I've had to act.
Right.
On impulse and training.
Well, and
resolve it without a gun.
And let me stop you there. You were given a certain number of tools, and they said, here are the 5 things on your tool belt. You get some restraints. You get some keys.
I didn't get restraints. My body was the thing I would restrain with.
No.
I was taught to restrain.
Yes, that was one of the tools that you could use. Mm-hmm. But you weren't given a gun.
No.
You weren't given a taser.
No.
You weren't given handcuffs.
No.
You weren't given mace or anything like that, right?
I was not taught pain compliance.
No. You were taught to figure out how to de-escalate the situation with those tool sets.
The training was called de-escalation training.
De-escalation training, right? And one of the things that I think a lot of people are missing about this whole situation is that one of the first things that officers are supposed to do is to de-escalate the situation. not escalate and murder, right?
Not escalate to murder, which very often we know that they do.
We know that they do for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy, and I say this almost every episode, that shot up the church with the gun.
Dylan Roof.
There's so many examples.
Or Kyle Rittenhouse, who was able to shoot several people, walk around with a loaded weapon.
He had it in his hands.
And was given an escort, rode home.
Yeah.
In what they would call a chaotic situation, but he had the complexion for the protection.
Well, I mean, and honestly, when
it's us,
right,
they are more likely to pull that gun to see us as a threat and to put us down.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the big argument within the African American community is if, she's got this knife in her hand, and if my daughter was the girl in the pink, I would want this other. Listen, I don't want you to kill another kid.
I don't want a baby shot.
I don't want to. Yeah.
Now, I'd never want a baby shot. I know from, once again, my training of my history, if anyone's coming after us, if I'm not going to let my girl go after a kid with a knife, like there's no way I'm letting that happen. And that's what's so sad about and tragic about the situation. The father was on the streets. He was he's there. And so something went horribly wrong that his daughter's in a fight with multiple people.
Yeah.
And that she feels the need to have a knife to be protected.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of things that have gone wrong. And it's a waterfall of problems that have happened to get yourself to that moment where your daughter dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just know by virtue of what I've been through and what I understand about the world, I would handle that situation way differently. Yeah. And that tells me that the situation could be handled differently and that we have multiple videos and situations of white people behaving badly.
Where they're apprehended safely.
Where they are apprehended safely. If not safely, alive, no matter what.
Right. And
the same story of that guy in Minnesota. I will just keep repeating. He goes into a Menards, not wearing a mask, attacks the cops when they come to talk to them. Cop reaches into his car, drags the cop down the street. Cop tries to break open the window. He takes the cop's hammer, hits the cop in the head with it. He got home alive. Went to jail alive. Was never shot. Never seen as this deadly threat, even though he's dragging a cop down the road at 40 miles an hour.
Right. Right.
Right? And so when it's someone whom they empathize with and understand as a person, once again, that human-to-human connection that I talked about earlier, they are able to find alternative outcomes. But when it's one of us, they are more likely to shoot first and ask questions later. Right. And right now, one of the things that I did see also when I was doing my research is that Columbus has had several shootings. I think like 6 recently that have involved young black people in altercations with police. And so they're looking into an investigation because there's quite a few situations in Columbus, Ohio, where policing has not been equitable.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're in Cincinnati, so we're about an hour from Columbus. So we're under the, same governor. And I think we've heard so many times that things like that have happened in Columbus and it's happened in Cincinnati. And the scary thing is we have children and we're raising them in this situation. And honestly, whether your child is, at the wrong place at the wrong time could really mean a life or death situation. I understand that if there is a fight going on and you feel like someone is in danger, that the police should be allowed to do their job. However, the first step in their job is to de-escalate the situation. It should not be to shoot
people at the situation.
It should not. Because
she was at her home. It wasn't like whoever she was fighting, it wasn't like she went to their home to stab them.
She was on her land.
And
right?
so, Ohio is a stand your ground state. You were supposed to be able to defend yourself.
You are.
Unfortunately, it almost never works out for black people. Stand your ground laws almost never work out for black people.
Yeah, no.
Because they weren't made for us to use.
They're not. They're for white people in Florida. That's.
Well, no, white people here too have used them. It's the idea that you don't have to retreat. And yet, in her case, somehow it does not stand for her to have been able to defend herself in what should have been her home.
Right. Because they, again, like you said, they came to her.
Right. Whoever she's fighting, it's not like they weren't residents of the home. There's nothing that has said they were also residents of that home.
Oh, and she's probably terrified. But there's also I don't know. There's also this argument that she had the knife in her hand.
Yeah. And everybody said that they know. It's very interesting that people speculate about all this stuff around it. Like she was trying to kill that girl. Do you know that for sure?
You don't.
You're making an assumption.
Well, yeah.
She was in a fight with her.
She was.
But how do you, if you don't know that, if everyone's going to tell me, if I say, if I were to say, and I'm not saying this, if I were to say that officer was overtly racist, everyone's going to tell me we do not know his heart.
Right.
But they are going to tell me that they know her heart and that she had murder in her heart.
Right.
Once again, I've worked with children. I've seen children in complete rage.
Yeah.
I've seen them make mistakes that you just wouldn't understand if I told you how the situation unfolded.
Yeah.
And I've also been able to tell myself in that moment, this kid doesn't know what's supposed to happen next, even if they were to do this thing. So my job is to stop them from doing the thing.
Right.
So that they don't have to live with these consequences.
Well, and I mean, and honestly, again, she's 16.
Yeah.
Right. But also just in general, and I don't know exactly the wording of the meme, but it is, we need to normalize that police should be apprehending people safely. Yes. Black people. Right. Whether they did something wrong or not.
Yeah. And I do understand he walked into a situation where he was made to think, the cop was made to think that there was an assault happening with a knife, and he sees an assailant with a knife, and so he has to act.
But he gets very scary and shoots her 4 times.
Right.
That's the first thing you think to do?
Well, he's got a gun. If you have a hammer, every problem is a nail.
But he also has a taser.
That's often the problem with contemporary policing, is that it's shoot first, ask questions later. You want to make it home tonight.
You know what, honestly, this makes me think of the kid you went to school with on Fountain Square.
Fair and Crosby.
Honestly, they started out back in the day with the mace and stuff. Nowadays, it would have just been bullets.
Yeah. I mean, they still use mace. They often will. And when you see situations like this, they'll have arguments. Well, mace wouldn't have been effective at that distance. Tasers might not have been effective at that distance. The only guarantee was a gun. Once again, it's that falling on there's no other way. When it's us, when it's our bodies, there's no other way. And it is tragic.
Yeah.
Because there should be some other way. And I genuinely know there is another way.
Yeah.
They put teachers every day. You can remember your own time in school, right?
Yeah.
There were security guards at our schools because we both went to inner city schools, but they weren't often in the classroom if something popped off.
No,
and the teacher had to intervene, right? I mean, I went to Aiken. Occasionally somebody might have a box cutter. Things happen.
Razors in their ponytails. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not saying that happened every day or anything, but it happened. It could happen. It did happen.
There are people with far less tools.
Yes.
Right.
Who have to solve these problems. Who are
charged with.
We've been underfunding.
Who are responsible for de-escalating situations with the same demographic.
Yeah.
Right. Same age range.
Right.
And
they do it every day with considerably less funding than we give the police departments.
Or thanks or salary or support or any of that.
And here's my thing, and I've been saying it over and over again. We don't give enough to mental health.
You know.
And police officers should not be sent into situations that involve domestic violence or mental health.
Now let's talk about that. There's an interesting part of that where we were talking about, we don't really call the police, right? Like just because
there's a reason we don't. They're not there for us. They are there to protect property. Property more than persons.
And you just don't know. I mean, I feel like I've always felt this way.
Well, there's a reason you've always felt this way. You've grown up in contemporary America.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel this way now, right? If there's a situation with some kids going on, I don't,
They're just kids. It's not for a police intervention.
No, because they're...
Unless you know it is specifically dangerous in a specific way. If you see a weapon... Right. Particularly a gun.
Right. I mean, but if you think about, black folks and kids fighting in the street, how many fights did you see on your block? And then the parents came out like, y'all fooling, everybody go home. Right.
But I do think the communities are so distant from each other now.
Fair enough.
That it's harder for people to intervene. That they people don't know each other enough. They don't trust each other enough.
Yeah.
And so
my first instinct would have been to pull the girl off. That would have been my first instinct.
My first instinct is there's no... So
grab her by her waist and try to calm her down.
I have a strong rabbit sense. So for me, if this situation is going left, or things are going to get bad, I need to get the heck out of there. And so if I think if there's any situation where my child is being jumped, we are not in that location anymore.
Right, but let's say this.
Or even if I'm at my own home and these people have somehow invaded my home, well, if they're in my home, across the threshold of my home, then I'm doing whatever it takes to get them out. But my daughter's not having a fight with two women. Now, there is some speculation about those two women being foster sisters, former foster children who were trying to address her for behavior towards her foster mother. There was some speculation that in one of the calls, it was said that someone had put hands on a grandmother, and that was why the fight was happening. Like, we don't really know. They haven't given us any real information.
And we can revisit once we get the actual details to discuss that. But yeah, I mean, but let's say this. We're in the house. Victoria's 16. She goes outside to the front. She's allowed to go by herself at this point because she's 16.
Yeah.
And we see her outside fighting with the girl.
Then I bring her in the house.
My first instinct is to grab her and get her off of the
situation. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't, knife or not, I don't know that I could say that I wouldn't. My natural instinct.
Not calling the cops about it.
We're definitely not calling the cops about it.
No reason to call the cops.
But my natural instinct is to pull the girls apart, right?
Yeah, to stop the altercation.
To stop the altercation.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'd like to think that that's good, and honestly, it may be unsafe, right? The other girl could stab me, but like when it's something that you see, it's outside your house, and like, it's your child involved. Like, there's so many things happening.
Yeah, my instinct is get my child out of this situation as quickly as possible. Like I said, that's my rabbit sense. This is dangerous. Let's get everybody out of this. Yeah. And if we have to go, we're going. Yeah. Like, if it's somehow, it escalates in some way, and there, I'm going to think my way around it. Yeah. I'm going to. And I'm not anti-police. I've had positive interactions with police. I do believe there is a time and a place where they are necessary and helpful. But in a situation like this, a bunch of 16-year-olds fighting, or even if in some situations one of the girls was maybe 28, it's like, why are these adults trying to fight a little girl anyway? Why does this little girl feel like she has to fight? So many questions. Because allegedly, so many unknowns. The girl in the pink was the girl who actually had the knife, and Ma'kia got the knife from her and was trying to defend herself or fight her. Yeah. With the, you know what I mean? So once again, so much to speculate about, so little we know. And when we find out more information, we'll definitely bring it back and talk about it. Yep. So, tragic situation. Definitely. We're praying for the families. Praying for the family. All the families. It's very unfortunate. It definitely is. I do hope that, once again, as I said before, when there's a crisis like a fire or something, there's a van that pulls up and gives you resources. I'm hoping that her family has resources at this time while they grieve and mourn the death of their daughter. Yeah. Because nobody should have to go through that. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, for all the families involved, right? And what's so messed up about the foster care system, I'm just going to say this before I bounce. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That's okay, go ahead. We are more willing as a society to know that a parent has problems, to take their children from them and pay someone else to raise their children, when very often money would solve some of the parental problems. So we don't give the parents money to keep their children at home. We will never do that because puritanical society says that's wrong. We'd much rather pay a stranger to raise a child who is in distress than to give the parents money and resources in that direction. That's very true. It's weird. It's among the weirdest things we do. Yeah. And I'm not saying every parent should get to keep their kid and stay in the foster system, but there's a lot of it's a weirdness. Steps. There's a lot of steps that are missing before they are taken out of the home. Yeah. Once again, I don't think children should stay in homes where there is abuse. I don't think they should stay in homes where there is neglect. But what often causes neglect? A lack of resources, lack of money. Yeah. Not being able to find a job that allows you to take care of your children. There's a lot of, most people don't know, there's a lot of rules around once the state is involved. When you have children, you have to have enough bedrooms for your children. You have to have, there are all these rules suddenly where people who aren't involved in child services don't have these rules. Yeah. And where are you supposed to get the money for that stuff? And sometimes they provide you with help and support for that stuff. And depending on what system you're in, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't. Yeah. And yet, if they remove the children, somebody has to pay for it. And we're paying for that. We're paying for children to not be with their parents sometimes because the system doesn't know how to teach people at times. There are times where the system works. I'm not saying the system never works. I've seen it work. I've seen it go horribly wrong too in ways that are tragic. And I'm betting that this situation was tragic and that she was failed by the system.
Yeah.
Because to even be in that space, a variety of things had to go wrong.
Yeah.
And so I mourn for Ma'kia Bryant. I do believe that more should have been done.
Didn't have to end up this way.
It did not have to end this way.
God rest her soul.
Yeah.
We're praying for her family and for all the other families involved.
Yes.
Because I'm sure they're like, oh, we're going to fight, but they probably never meant for
her to die.
Yeah.
And I really hope that they're able to, for all those who were present for that trauma that day, that they are able to get the help they need.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we definitely need more resources for that in our communities because we know these traumas are happening all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
And so rather than, chastise these communities for some of these troubles, why don't we try to help? Why don't we find better ways to help?
Support them.
And we can't just throw everybody in jail because what's that doing for anybody?
Well, and the world's not
besides creating a system where we have to pay for them anyway. Right? All right, so that's been the show. We went a little over here at the end because I took too long telling my story and we had to talk about Ma'kia Bryant.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us for another week of the Hallspace Podcast.
We appreciate you joining us.
We hope you've had some good thoughts and given you something to digest while you take your drives home or you do your daily walk or whatever you do when you listen to us.
Maybe spark some good conversation with your friends and family.
Yeah. If you have anything to add to the conversation, please email us or, you can call us on the Anchor app or, send us a message.
Find us on the social medias.
Yes. But don't try to start an argument because that's not what I do.
That's not what you do. No.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to argue.
Yeah. Nicole will argue with you.
If I answer.
She'll forget to answer. She'll get mad, bring it to me, say she's going to respond, and then forget. She's horrible at the responding.
I am bad at it. Yes. I really only want to fight with people who. I really only want to fight with you.
Yeah.
So. You know what the music means.
You know what the music means. Our time is up.
I say good day, sir.
I say good day. The Hallspace Podcast is brought to you by Hall Productions, LLC. Show notes and credits can be found at our webpage, thehallspacepodcast.wordpress.com. Any questions, comments, or concerns can be sent to us at thehallspacepodcast@gmail.com. The show is written by Daggerpin Davis. Music is curated by DJ Cabal. The show is produced by Chuck Jones and recorded at Slash and Trash Studios. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you all have a good week. House Hall. We rise brilliantly.